Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, from wherever you're joining us around the world. Sorry for being a couple minutes late. I had a bit of a tech disaster. My laptop was decided to freeze, so hopefully we don't have any of those problems throughout the live session. So I can still see a few people trickling in from the waiting room, so I'll just give them a few more moments just to join us, and then we'll get started straight away. And I suppose a little bit of housekeeping while we wait for people just to join us. So the session is being recorded. You will receive a copy of the recording in the slides afterwards. The chat and the QA function fully available for you to utilize today. So myself and Shannon, who you can see on screen, will be able to answer any questions you have. Well, maybe not any that are related to the content we're we're delivering. Um, and then we'll be able to get those answered for you live as well. So we'll have some time for Q&A at the end, I'm sure. If not, we'll get back to you via email as well. So with that, I think most people have hopefully grabbed the drink and are ready to go. So let's get started. So yeah, thank you for joining us today. So my name is Chris Rogers. I'm from HYCU. So we're here today just to discuss the building true data resilience in education. So let's take a look at our speakers and our agenda. So first of all, the agenda. So data protection challenges and the financial barriers, potentially hidden costs for data accessibility. How do we enhance our cyber resiliency? And then a real world example of that, how that kind of translates into your organizations that you're a part of. So as I mentioned before, my name is Chris Rogers. I'm a product marketing manager here at HYCU. And I'll let Shannon introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Shannon. I work at Wasabi. So I really specialize in understanding market trends in the education sector. So really excited to talk to you guys today.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Right, so let's take a look at, cyber incidents. We all know that they happen every single day to multiple different organizations every single day all around the world. It's not specifically education, but obviously we're here to talk about that today. But they've actually tripled across schools and universities in the US specifically from last year. And Shannon, can you just talk to me a little about some of the data that, universities or educational facilities have that's kind of maybe a bit more unique and a bit more valued?
Yeah, I think the reason that they're probably prime targets for cyber attacks is because you're dealing with a lot of personal data. So when you're applying for universities and submit financial forms, there's bank information, social security numbers, addresses. It's just a whole portfolio of who you are as a person that's easily accessible in these environments. When it comes through K through 12, even your vaccine records are there too. So highly compromisable data that needs to be protected and is often used and leverages for a lot of ransom after it's been taken. There's also research data. So a lot of universities will sell their IP, cutting edge research. So there's a market for that as well. Which makes them prime targets is because of the lack of cybersecurity. So we're going to dive that a little bit further as we go into this presentation to go like what the specifics are for lack of security. But I think those are the three main factors of why they're prime targets.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's look at kind of what modern learning looks like, right? It's I think it's been happening for a little while, but I think COVID accelerated a lot of the modern learning initiatives we see today, right? I've had, friends and people I know who went to university but never actually went to university, right? They've got their degrees and everything else, but they never actually physically went to where they were supposed to be going, or also, they chose to do a completely online course. And with that obviously creates new challenges, right? So, things like new learning systems, they're going to be potentially on things like Zoom but other platforms, but they could also be inside of on-premises systems, in the cloud, in SaaS apps, across all of that modern data estate we see today. And then we've got distributed environments, they're often siloed away, potentially separated, creating loads of different access points for bad access to get in, a big attack surface. If you think that every single one of your students could be a potential attack surface, right? Some colleges and universities have tens or hundreds of thousands of students, right? Now trying to manage that perimeter is almost going to be impossible. And then Shannon, do you want to talk to us about kind of the limited resources and those personal devices? Because I know you kind of had an experience yourself where you couldn't actually run your own. The lesson you were trying to attend didn't run just because of the technology. So yeah, give us a little feel
Yeah,
about that.
no, it's very true. So ironically, I'm taking my MBA. So I'm seeing the difference of what school was like when I took my bachelor's 10 years ago versus now. The university I'm attending, it's a pilot online hybrid program. So they're having teachers teach in class while students are half in class and half online. But because the actual classroom doesn't have strong internet connection, our Zoom calls constantly crash when she's trying to share presentations because it's too much bandwidth on the call with everyone showing their face. So it's just kind of an example of schools fighting for the bare basics to be able to implement this technology. It's not there, let alone thinking about what are we going to do to back it up.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great example. Literally the primary reason for school is to teach lessons, right? And they're currently not being able to do that with their technology, and it's probably because of budget. Let's be realistic, right? It's probably not going to be a technical reason or a physical reason why they can't install better internet in there. It's probably literally going to be a budgetary cause, right? And they're getting stretched from pillar to post. And again, that's why educational systems and educational institutes are a prime example and a prime target for attackers. But also this kind of bring your own device, right? So students leveraging their own laptops, own phones, own smart devices. They potentially, we can embed things into documents. I mean, Shannon made a joke a minute ago about the presentation I was just loading when my laptop crashed that she'd embedded embedded something in the slide. But actually, that's something that can actually happen, right? Inside of Excel sheets or anything else like that, right? So especially with the help of AI, it's incredibly easy to do those types of things now. So again, that attack surface is absolutely huge. It's probably one of the biggest attack surfaces on the planet when you think about it, because most universities won't, provide laptops like a corporate system will, right? Corporate will provide devices and they'll be locked down. They'll have the right antivirus and the right threat detection systems and all the password policies and all these things, right? But actually, when you're bringing in from the outside, you don't know what that person's got on their laptop. It might not be anything um they're trying to do, but it might just be accidental, right? So you've suddenly got this huge perfect storm of lack of budget and things that are hard to do, distributed systems, kind of brand new ways of operating. So people who are potentially, lecturers and those types of people who have been in the industry for 30, 40 years, they know their topic incredibly well. Maybe they don't know exactly how to use Zoom and SharePoint and all these other systems incredibly well, but at the moment. And then you've got all these personal devices on network as well to kind of try and battle. So it's kind of a perfect storm, right? So let's take a look at what good could look like, or what does good look like from a cyber resiliency, data protection standpoint, right? So let's look at our core requirements for data resiliency, especially in education. But this can apply across the board as well. It's not just for education, but it's a really good standard to kind of let you know work from. Let's try and tick these boxes. So the first one is, secure backup posture management and hardened appliances, right? So what does this mean? We're actually making sure that your software that you're installing to do your data protection is secure as it can possibly be. And it's looking for things that look out of place. And that's what posture management is. It's exactly like, I'm going to use Wasabi as a great choice here. They've got an S3 bucket, and you might enable public access on certain S3 buckets because you're sharing content out, maybe from a class, for instance, right? You're sharing content from a bucket. But a bucket you're storing your backup data in, you don't want to have public access for obvious reasons, right? Because you don't want people getting into your backup data. But so if HYCU sees that Wasabi has public access or it's been misconfigured, or potentially a threat actor has got hold of credentials and has gone and configured public access, HYCU is going to then alert and say, by the way, this has got public access. Are you sure? And I'm sure Wasabi will do the same thing as well, right? And then we want backup and recovery for all workloads. And this is kind of, I'm going to say, an obvious one, but people forget that the data lives outside of, the core three or four applications that they utilize in the in their day-to-day lives, right? So, they're probably looking at things like VMware or Nutanix or, the Microsoft ecosystem with 365. But actually, when we look at the modern data estate, and I'm going to come across that in a few slides, it's much, much bigger than people think, right? Shannon on the background there, she's got Fenway Park, home of the Boston Red Sox. They're actually a HYCU customer as well as a Wasabi customer. So we actually did some analysis inside of their environment. We asked them, how many SaaS applications do you think you have? And the general answer was, we might have 10 or 15. And actually, when we ran it, it was over 250 SaaS applications they were running just to play baseball, right? And data is distributed across every single one of those. So now suddenly they went from thinking they had 15 to 20 or 10 to 20 to over 200 that they need protection for. And that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying by the modern data estate, not just the things you see every day, but also things that are individually owned by application owners.
It's a good example of shadow IT.
Yeah.
We've been talking about shadow IT for almost a decade now, but it's almost become more prevalent with AI workloads.
Yeah, 100%. AI workloads, and also it's so easy to go and buy things on credit card right now. People, that
Yeah.
kind of what used to be B2B when you get like a purchase order and go through a reseller, and there's this whole process of procurement that can all be bypassed with someone with a corporate credit card with a 10 grand spend limit, right? And they can just go and buy something, put data into it, and you have no idea it's there from an IT standpoint. And we
Oh
we have
yeah.
tools that can help with that as well, right? So
Every team wants to work on their own and work quickly. So I don't know a team that really consults IT when they make those quick decisions.
yeah, 100%. And then we need to make sure we have malware detection or threat hunting, as it's known in industry, right? We need to know what's going on in our environment, what's inside of our virtual machines, right? Is there a payload in there that we want to eradicate? Is there potential ransomware inside of our systems already? We want to look at anomaly detection or indicators of compromise, right? So if the backup changed 10% yesterday, and that's been a regular occurrence, between 7, 8, 9, 10% on a daily basis, and suddenly we have a 300% change on our data, that's anomalous, right? It looks weird, it looks strange, it looks like something's happened. So we're going to flag that inside the systems, give you an alert to say, by the way, guys, this looks wrong. Application-centric recovery, this kind of goes back to knowing what application you're recovering and making sure you recover in the way the application wants it to, right? It's not necessarily having good enough just having the data. You need to have the application-centric piece as well. So for instance, a lot of SaaS tools will have an export function, right? That technically is getting your data back, but it's going to export it in an XML file, which is, 3,000 scrolls long on your mouse, and you can't do anything with it, right? You can't read it, you can't re-understand it. A normal user isn't going to be able to figure it out. But with HYCU, you can actually put it straight back into the application itself, and you'll be able to read it and see it. So there's the kind of difference what application-centric recovery would look like. This one's the obvious one, secure and offsite backups. I think this is probably the biggest one I come across, especially in schools where they have campuses. They can say, "Oh yeah, we've got two campuses, we've got two data centers, and how far are they apart? Oh, just around the corner. Oh, so they're probably served by the same power grid. They're probably served by the same, security systems, probably served by the same access controls, all those types of things, right? Yeah, they are. Okay, so how are we securing those backups, right? How are we if they manage to get into primary data center, they're probably going to be able to get into the secondary, or if power goes out or a corruption happens, it's probably going to impact both of those at the same time, right? And that's where, Wasabi are going to come in and be like, hey, where do you want to store it? Okay, if you've got a place in Boston, Boston's maybe not the best place to store it in somewhere else or wherever it might be, right? But it's completely offsite, independent copies outside of the production workload as well. This one for me is the one that kind of hits home the most. And we're going to be talking about this a little bit later, Shannon, as well in a bit more detail. But consistent and meaningful testing. And what I mean by that is I make sure I put meaningful in there as well, because consistent testing can just be running a script and saying, yeah, my script completed. But are you actually running a business simulation of whether you can recover or not? Or are you just running bare minimums to do checkbox exercise to say, yes, we tested this one VM recovering to this one platform, and it's the same VM every single week, right? Well, actually, that VM doesn't go down, it's something different, or a whole site or a group of applications, whatever it might be. If you haven't tested and done it meaningfully, you're not going to be able to do that. And a big part of why people don't is cost. And we are going to come on to that in a bit as to the costs behind testing data. And the last one, the biggest one, if you take one thing away from this, air gap and immutable your back and mark your backups as immutable. The biggest reason I see for people not being able to recover after attack is because their backups got impacted as well. They didn't have a place to recover from because their backups were impacted. Immutability stops that. It means you
Yeah.
cannot a cyber criminal or a threat actor or an imposter, whoever it might be, they can't, even if they take control of everything else, they won't be able to delete the data that's in the Wasabi bucket. They can't delete the data that's on the Wasabi platform. So you've always got a place to recover to. You've always got a copy of data that cannot be touched, cannot be changed, cannot be deleted. So I think that's probably the biggest thing that I see. So let me just jump into kind of HYCU and what we do a little bit, just to kind of show you guys that we have a complete platform. So it's not just about individual silos of protection. We try and cover the modern data estate. And what does that really mean? Well, it's from your traditional workloads, so anything, running VMware, or maybe you change to a HCI stacks in Nutanix, or you're running Dell, NetApp, Zen Server, Hyper-V, whatever else you're running, all those file shares and object stores are on-prem. All that data is completely covered, absolutely. And then we go into the hybrid and multi-cloud world. Maybe you've been an early adopter into cloud and you're running, maybe other cloud native workloads or VMs in public cloud, but also things like the actual AWS Lambda, so functions and Google Cloud Run and those types of things. So more those cloud native workloads. And then you start moving into SaaS workloads. So the obvious one that everybody knows is Microsoft 365. As soon as you get into SaaS, you start coming across a thing called the shared responsibility model, which means they're reliant for the app to be up, but you're reliant on the data. So we have to back that up, and that's a big gap at the moment in the marketplace. Microsoft done a great job of advertising that. I think maybe forcefully after a lawsuit they had to tell people, but they've done a good job of telling people. But as you start looking, GitHub, we talked about, intellectual property earlier, where we're storing code and stuff like that, making sure that's backed up, Entra ID for identity, DocuSign for all those contracts, and all these other applications that are there. And as we start moving into, I'm going to say new world, but what is becoming increasingly normal now, AI workloads. So Pinecone databases, Redis, Google, BigQuery, all these kind of places where we're starting to put large amounts of data, large amount of processing power, we can help back up those workloads as well. And then a little piece on the cyber resilience arm of HYCU. So we have the HYCU R Shield, which is our kind of cyber resiliency fabric. It runs all the way through all of our platform. So it's not a bolt-on option. It's not a kind of an extra SKU or an extra, extra product. It's just the kind of fabric that flows through the HYCU R cloud platform. And it's kind of based upon three principles: always protected, always observing, and always ready. I won't bore you with all the details of all of these, but essentially what it means is we're deploying in the most secure way we possibly can and applying immutability to that automatically. We're looking for threats inside of your data sets with active malware threat hunting, anomaly detection. We're also making sure you're in compliance, a lot of regulatory compliance with universities and schools. And we're also telling you what your RTO is going to be. So you know how long it's going to take for you to recover, to make sure that's within your business and organizational needs as well. And the last piece, always ready. Well, we're validating the backups continuously and automated for you to make sure we know they're clean and then know they're good and can be recovered. We know we can restore either everything you have in a DR situation or an individual file or folder you need. And we can put that into a clean room in the cloud and do simple resilience testing on a regular basis for you. So it's really, really simple, really easy to understand.
Yeah,
And
it's
then,
a
as I
good
said,
proactive and reactive model, right? So it allows you to
yeah.
handle situations where you can be the firefighter and the probably the strategic business partner.
Yeah, exactly. We're doing things. I always say that you can stop attackers, right? But you can slow them. You can never really stop them fully. If they really want to get in, they'll probably get in and they'll probably cause some damage. But what we can do is we can make sure we can recover and we can make sure it's hard as possible, right? So we can deploy as securely as we can be. We can do all the stuff that's going to see if they've done anything in the account, and then we're always ready to recover on the backside of that. And as I mentioned before, the complete infrastructure coverage we have you covered, right? So we're number one in Nutanix data protection in the world, but we cover across the whole estate as well. So as you can see on the screen here, pretty much every single big logo in there we cover, and all the kind of use cases at the bottom there, from automated application discovery, so and HYCU knows what's running inside of your virtual machines, so we can protect them properly, all the way through from cyber resilience, long-term and archiving, edge sites, all those things as well. And then not just the on-prem systems, right? Not more than 90 plus workloads are protected by HYCU, the actually biggest in the backup and data protection world. We have the most amount of integrations across everyone. And you can find them all for yourself in the new HYCU R Cloud Marketplace. So scan the QR code, it will take you directly to our marketplace on the website. You can search for your app or your integration you're looking for. If it's not there, you can also submit a request for us to protect it as well, and then you get automatic updates from that as well. And if you go and click into any of these, you'll see like white papers. You'll probably see a demo, a click-through demo. You can kind of feel and see the product for yourself as well. All through the website as well. And that's kind of like the HYCU piece of what we do done. I'm going to hand back to Shannon and kind of get the Wasabi angle on this as well, and how the technologies work together, and then we'll come back together later on to talk about the case study as well. So, Shannon, over to you. Just tell me to click next when you want me to move the
Yeah,
slides on.
no, definitely. I really just want to highlight some things that you brought up, Chris, because you mentioned one of the biggest pieces on your core requirements is backing up data. Um,
Mhm.
what we've done at Wasabi is that we've noticed the past couple years the hidden costs of what it is to actually back up that data. So for the past 3 years, we published a index report, the Cloud Storage Index, where we survey over 1,000 IT leaders. Um, and we try to really understand of like what the current state of cloud spend is. What we found, especially in the education market, more than 3/4, so 76%, exceeded their budget when it came to just specific cloud spending.
Wow.
Um, yeah, and where did that spending go to? Half of it went just to fees. So if you're storing 100 terabytes or 500 terabytes, when you're thinking about your budget, you almost have to double your projection in order to hit the capacity you actually need to store. Based on what we're seeing, that 50% has been a year-over-year trend on fees and not capacity. Um,
That's crazy when you think about it, because people are going to have to either, budgets are budgets, right? That's probably set for a reason because that's what the educational institute can afford. So what they're essentially doing is saying that, okay, we're gonna have to store less, which means either not protecting some data or cutting retention times down to not meet the SLAs they require, just because they've got networking fees, right? Which is mad, right? They're essentially impacting their business and organizational requirements just because of these networking fees.
Yeah, well, I didn't put this stat in here, but it's very true. So what we noticed too is that 49% of education institutes have immutable data because of the cost of making it immutable. So you're exactly right. They have to compromise. Like, what do you choose? Do you choose securing it? Do you choose backing up? Do you choose not backing it up? It's tough choices to make.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when it comes to those fees, like different things too, is you'll get fees from recovering data. So we noticed that data is being recovered at least monthly. 89% of institutions are doing it at least monthly. Some are doing it weekly. 91 are accessing it from cold tiers. So cold tiers are like Glacier, Blob, things like that. So when you're setting up data with intelligent tiering in order to save money, you'll spend $1 or so on Glacier because you're thinking you're not going to touch that data. This could be student data that you need to preserve for 7, 10 years for long compliance reasons, but it's actually being accessed more than you think it is. Part of that's due to AI analytics, the way that we've been using data and how we're trying to integrate it to more and more solutions when we're trying to modernize our campuses. That's just only going to create increase the amount of touch points, and because of that, I think that we're going to start seeing that fees might start passing capacity. The last thing I want to touch on is the biggest hinder to those fees is egress, and I'll show you guys a little bit an example of what those egresses are. 10 terabytes is pretty small, right? It's really not a lot of data, but say you needed to pull out 10 terabytes because um, something happened to a campus, or you were trying to shift workloads to a new environment because you had a new dean that wanted to use a new system or wanted to launch a new research project. Just 10 terabytes is close to $1,000 for the traditional cloud providers. Those are the type of budget, those are the type of situations that I don't think campuses or public schools can really handle because they're unexpected costs that just almost unavoidable.
Yeah, and this kind of goes back to the point I was making earlier, Shannon, about not wanting to test. Not wanting to test backup and recovery, especially the recovery piece, right? Because if they're trying to do a real meaningful test of, let's even say like, they're doing a weekly 1 terabyte, right? So, okay, it's going to be $500, whatever that the maths worked out to. But if you're doing that every single week or every single month, right, this adds up. So they go, oh, how can we cut costs to, we need to up the bandwidth so Shannon can actually see the slides on the Zoom, right? well,
Yeah.
it's a thing that doesn't add value, but actually you really want to do it. Otherwise, you don't know if you can ever recover. So it's kind of one of those things you're being again hindered by doing things, I'm going to say by the book, but doing things properly and making sure you have these resiliency plans in place and they're tested, but you're not doing them because of the money, right? That's a problem.
And I really just wanted to kind of hammer it home. So this example is 100 terabytes. But these are the type of fees that come up. So API costs are just the cost when it means to taking that data and storing it in the cloud to make it immutable. There's a high fee to that. You'll see with S3 standard, the fees are smaller, but the colder the tier, the higher the access point, the higher the fee point. So if you think that you're saving money up front, being able to test those or being able to pull those, because it's often the cold tiers that get targeted, um, that's where you're going to see a lot of the money. So you're getting fees from both ends. Retrieving archival data, that's going to have a cost too. Reading your data, so just having the ability to read it has a cost, and then transferring those workloads has a cost as well.
Yeah, this kind of outlays it for me really, really obviously that there has to be, you almost have to have a dedicated resource to be able to figure out where's the best place to do to put your data, right? Like you need to try and figure out which tier is right. Then there's always going to be unforeseen circumstances, and this is kind of what they're going to play on, right? Is the fact that it's so complicated that people just kind of ignore it and kind of like but just go, oh, it's a cost. I'll just have to deal with it when it comes. Whereas actually, realistically, what most educational institutions want is predictability. Those types of I want to be able to budget for the next 3 years, knowing what my costs are going to be, because then I know how many students I can take on and all these kind of things, right? Whereas if you have these unknown costs, you can't find money from nowhere, right? They're not businesses where they can just say, hey, I'm just gonna up my price, right? That's not the way the education works, right? Especially if it's state and local government and things like that, and it's funded by that. You can't just add an extra zero onto a bill and go, oh, we'll make more revenue. That's people's taxes, that's people's livelihood, especially like where I'm from in the UK, where pretty much everything is public. It's all public money and there's not an endless pot, as we know. It's got to go on healthcare and it's got to go on to schooling and welfare services as well, so that if suddenly there is a 10, 15, $20,000 bill a month just for accessing data, it puts a strain on everyone.
Well, yeah, it's taxes, it's enrollment fees. Like it's kind of scary if you look at the enrollment costs, because universities are at a tipping point where um, people are not enrolling in high numbers as they used to. I think they dropped 15% in the past 5 years. So increasing the cost, you're only going to decrease enrollment. So you're at a lose-lose in any situation you're at.
Yeah, exactly that. Exactly that. So what's the answer?
So that's where we come in.
Exactly.
The
Exactly.
So, what we do at Wasabi is that we don't charge API or egress fees or fees associated to being able to access your data. Our company, we're based on the fundamental principle that you should be able to use the data that you store. So it gives you the freedom to be able to do those digital innovations that you're trying to do, help with those research projects, integrate those environments so that you don't have data silos in those regions. It makes it so that you don't have to pick between bandwidth or data protection. Um, so uh, we're about 80% less than the standard. And with especially with when you add the fact that there's no API or egress fees. We're S3 compatible, so we're on the same performance level as an S3 standard. And all the data is immutable. So it's built in immutability. There's no cost to make that data immutable. And then we have about 13 or 15 regions across the globe. So you're able to store different areas of your choice. So say if you have a Boston office and you want to be able to store it in Virginia or store it in London, um, you have those abilities too. So you can test your data, no fees. You can recover it. You can shift those workloads to different environments for different projects. And then you can create replications and versions, different versions of it all. So it allows you to be able to have the best practices of those core requirements without seeing a bottom line on your bill at the end of the week.
Yeah, I think the immutability piece is the biggest one here, right? Like, people not turning on immutability in kind of this day and age, it still baffles me that people don't do it, but it is a costing. When we've analyzed it, and it can actually sometimes double the cost of the data storage because of the way the mutability works in public clouds. So actually, having that, I'm going to say free of charge, right, for you guys. There's no additional, API fees or anything else like that. It's an amazing cost saving, but also an amazing piece of technology that's needed, but it comes at a cost at other places, right? So you're kind of giving that for free to organizations, which is amazing. It's really, really cool. And the fact you're S3 compatible, so pretty much everything works with it, right? So like our solution works seamlessly with Wasabi. It's built, we've built it that way. But the fact that if you've got another tool or you even just wanted an S3 browser or anything, anything you're doing on Amazon today is going to be completely compatible with Wasabi. I think that's an amazing thing.
Yeah, I think what's great about it is that I think S3 is basically the standard API or connection for a lot of systems. So having
Yep.
that compatibility makes it easier. And I just kind of want to give some proof points here. So IDC, they also did a report on us where they interviewed our customers, and they did it from different sectors, from manufacturing, education, healthcare. But specifically with education, they found that it was extremely reliable because of that cost reduction. What IDC found too is that with every 100 terabytes stored, our customers were saving about 20,000 in storage costs, and that savings they were able to deploy it either in revenue opportunities or different areas that increased like a 38,000 potential. Those savings wasn't just capacity; it helped them with staff, so improving um, staff efficiency because, like Chris mentioned, you can't really hire a cloud economic specialist to sit and analyze like where's the best place to store your data. And it also really helps with business enablement because now that you have the access to that data and can read that data, you can do more with it.
Yeah, and you don't have to pick between this kind of like horrible like balance of compliance, risk, and budget, right? You can kind of meet all three of those really well by saying all the data we need to protect is protected. That's my compliance. Therefore, the data is less risky because it's now immutable, and also my budgets are met because I know I've got predictability and it's lower cost than all the competition, and I can get access to it, and I'm not penalized for storing it. And I think also just overall less complicated, right? You've got Wasabi tier of storage, right? That's that you put it into Wasabi and it's there. Whereas you go into any of the others, it's okay. Which tier do you want? It's kind of like, okay, well, how do I know which one to pick? And if it does intelligent automation, all this kind of stuff for tiering, it's might be tiering the wrong data, and you're not even doing it yourself. You're kind of trusting the system to do it. Something from that, as you said, that colder storage, which costs you more money, and it all becomes really complicated and kind of, you take your eye off the ball for a minute, and it can cost you potentially thousands of dollars. So let's look at, this is, I'm going to call it architecture, but essentially it's really, really simple. It's a really simple, easy solution for people to kind of hop on board with, right? So we've got the customer's modern data estate in front of us, right? We've got some potential physical machines that are still out there. We've got files, apps, virtual machines that are running, on premises in data centers in on campus, whatever it might be, or edge sites. And then we've got a whole world of cloud and SaaS. And HYCU can offer backup, cyber resiliency, and scanning for all of those workloads. And then essentially we just then partner with Wasabi. You point HYCU to Wasabi, and Wasabi ingests all that data, fully air gapped with immutable mutability on top of it. And then you have your buckets and your storage available to you. And then you've got exactly what you need for a fraction of the cost of what you'd be paying elsewhere, but also more coverage than you would have had before. Something that works seamlessly, is easy to use on both sides, and without the penalties that come with it. So, Shannon, anything that I've missed on that slide? It's pretty self-explanatory, but
No, I think the diagram kind of points it out. The one thing I kind of want to add is when it comes to best practices, always follow the 3-2-1 rule. So when we're thinking about how this works in this architecture, you want to have 3 copies of something, 2 of different media types. So it could be on-prem, it could be in the cloud. You want to have one that's off-site, that's replicated. And then you want to have one that's zero mutability. So this kind of just helps make this diagram kind of helps illustrate like it's possible to do that.
yeah, absolutely. And actually, inside of HYCU, we've got a newer feature that came out, which is actually export. So we can actually export the backups into a Wasabi S3 bucket that you can access the data outside of the platform itself, right? So let's say Microsoft 365 is down, right? And my boss or Shannon's boss has said, "Where's that spreadsheet, that presentation that I stored in OneDrive?" Oh, we can't get it, right? Because it's down. Well, actually, we can actually export from HYCU's backups into an S3 bucket and give access to that person for that critical piece of data, whatever it might be, and feed it out through that way as well. So there's kind of multiple different ways of doing it as well, which is great. But let's look at a kind of a real world case study. So um, a real life kind of customer. So Kansas Medical University, right? So maybe if I go through the challenges and then and we can kind of go through the solution afterwards. So they had a legacy solution that was still using agents. They had manual scheduling. It wasn't particularly intelligent. They were actually using a spreadsheet to track what was being backed up and not, which is, a very old school way of doing that. They were using tape, which is not still relatively common, especially in education. Tape is still seen as a really I'd say effective, but a kind of a known and a safe way of doing data backups too. But the problem with that, it's really, really complex and time intensive to recover that data, right? You've got to take the tape somewhere, bring it back, load it into the tape cartridge, load it into the machine, read it, make sure it's the right one, hope it hasn't got damaged in transit, all that type of stuff. And then they only had 40% of their data backed up, right? So lots of problems. Um, and then with HYCU, they were automating their backups, right? So we automatically cover 100% of their estate. And they were storing their copies with immutability inside of Wasabi Cloud, right? And Wasabi made sure that the data was protected from accidental deletion or ransomware tampering or anything else without using their immutability. Helps meet their regulatory compliance with their HIPAA and high-tech requirements. They included application. So rather than just the servers themselves, they were including application coverage as well, which is critical to get things back up and running quickly. And an amazing stat that HYCU and Wasabi were fully operational within hours. But that's the ideal solution for people is that you don't have to spend months and months deploying something, racking and stacking, figuring out how it works, and 5-day training courses and all these things that cost money to do. You want something that's super simple, super easy, and kind of I'm gonna say just works, right? Like that's why people love an iPhone, right? You pick it up and it just works. You know how to use it, and it's very, very simple. That's why iPhone sells billions and billions a year, whatever it might be. It's the same with HYCU, and it's that consumer grade experience, but at a business level, right? That's the kind of the beauty of it. I mean, Shannon, anything you want to add to this? Because I know you kind of specialize in education. I'm sure you've got some other stories or some other customers you might want to
Well,
kind of talk about.
it's interesting. Yeah. So what's interesting is the tape situation because with tape, it's not even just transit. If floods happen, there was one school I talked to where they had a fire happen in their IT server room. So when you have backups that are just tape, those situations that you don't anticipate to happen, like mayhem, um, you want to be able to have backups to that. And with Kansas Medical, not that that happened on their end, but this university really specializes in research, and a lot of their research it helps with uh, cancer and a lot of really important information. So the fact that they were only backing up 40% is tough, especially since that could be research that could be stolen. Um, One thing we'll go over on the benefits on the next one, but we went from 40%. They were able to now cover their entire environment, so 100%, which was it makes you feel good that you can help schools do that.
Yeah, 100%. It's always a bit closer to home when, especially like healthcare or schooling or those types of things. Not that we don't care about all of our customers, but it hits home, it hits closer to home when it's people's lives or people's educations and people's lives that you're impacting. It makes a bit of a difference. So yeah, and then a little quote from one of the engineers there from Kansas University Medical Center. So restoring data from tape used to take literal days and a lot of manual work. With HYCU and Wasabi, data is available in just a few clicks, and the joint solution works every time. I don't think you can get better praise than that, right? That data is available whenever they need it, and it just works. And I really like that kind of simplicity. Um, So let's go over kind of like the benefits, right, of the joint solution. So cost savings, absolutely, there's going to be cost savings from HYCU side as well. We're known as a kind of a consolidator in the industry, right? So where they might be using two or three or four backup solutions to cover their estate today, where the others can't cover everything, we can pretty much cover everything in a data estate. So we can kind of consolidate everything onto HYCU, reduce your licensing costs, and then obviously then point that to Wasabi to store the data, which means you get no egress, no API fees, and the free immutability as well. That kind of goes into the full protection, covering more workloads than anyone else in the marketplace. The next piece, easier testing and compliance, or actually testing and compliance, right? Or not being hit with a bill on the back end because you're trying to do the right thing and test your backups or test your recovery workflows, right? They can be tested regularly, even automated if you want to schedule that inside of HYCU without the pressure of knowing there's going to be a bill that follows in the post from a cloud provider. And that's going to help you pass audits, pass compliance, and all the rest of the things, right? That simplified backup management, no more spreadsheets to manage backups. Everything's either done automatically or with a completely policy driven automation. So exactly the same as setting up something in a calendar. You go in and say, I want it to back up, if every day, and I want it to be recoverable within 2 hours. And then let HYCU do its thing, and it would go away, find all your data, assign it the policy, and away it goes. And it does all the scheduling for you. That's like kind of a backup personal assistant, if you will. Um, and then we kind of move on to the where the data's stored, right? It's now stored in a secure, offsite, air-gapped location away from production in Immutable. And as Shannon said earlier, with regions and zones across the world, right? So you can, no matter where your source data is, you'll always find a region that's away from where you need it, where you need it to be, but also without hindering that kind of transfer as well. And then there's expedited restores. Recovery went from just from literal days of, as you say, driving things and driving through floods or driving through bad weather because they're taking down power pylons, right, to someone sitting in their home, nice and warm, clicking a few buttons and getting the data back and getting everyone up and running, right? And that's not just from a technical thing, but that's kind of a user experience thing, right? Like if teachers can't teach or if students can't take their lessons because data's not available or presentations or resources aren't available, that impacts people, right? And then it puts people behind schedule and that kind of things. Whereas actually, if we can recover that data in a matter of minutes and then a few clicks, then such a great user experience. People say, yeah, don't worry, we had a few issues, but now we're back and we're 10 minutes late. Go grab a coffee and we'll have it back by the time you're back from your coffee, rather than we'll see you next week after your vacation. That's a big difference. So Shannon, but kind of before we finish, anything you wanna cover, or anything that you've missed, or I've not explained particularly
I
well?
think we basically covered all of it. I think the key thing
Amazing.
is that once you free on cost, it allows you to do everything else because it allows you to deploy it to every location.
I know that Shannon's already answered one in the chat there, which I'll read out to the group. But so I'd like to back up my AWS instance. How can Wasabi assist me? Well, actually, it'd be a joint thing, right? So your AWS instance, if that's a VM or anything else in AWS, you can try HYCU for free and also Wasabi for free as well. So you can actually try backing up your AWS instance using HYCU and Wasabi completely free. Back up your AWS instance using HYCU and then place it into a Wasabi bucket, essentially free of charge for 30 days. Yeah, scan the QR code, and that will take you to the marketplace, which I spoke about earlier, the HYCU marketplace, and from there you'll be able to look at all the data that we can protect across the HYCU ecosystem, and then inside of there you'll also see the Wasabi as an option as well, so you can go straight to Wasabi from HYCU's page as well, and you'll find that as well. So if we don't have any more questions, oh no, we do. One more question come in. What about RDS? Yeah, RDS is covered as well. So yes, you can back up RDS using HYCU. Again, you can store that in AWS in Wasabi as well. So yes, of course. But if you log on to the marketplace, you'll be able to search for everything, and you can even filter on AWS or Azure instances or VMware or whatever else it is as well. Yeah, and if you can't scan the QR code, in the chat, the link's been put there. So hycu.com/solutions/marketplace. But on that note, I thank everyone for their time and your attention. Oh, is there? Yeah, that's it. Perfect. No more questions. I thank everyone for your time and your attention. It's been a pleasure, and we'll hope to see you on the next one. Shannon, thank you very much for joining us, and it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, no, it was great working with you, Chris, and looking forward to more in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your days.
All right.
Bye.
See you, everybody.